Thank you. Yes, Dave is a great friend, and as you probably most of you know, he's the co-author of the book that we both published almost 2 years ago now. So we have a quite extensive background, and it's a pleasure to fill in for him. And he will be missed tomorrow in the organisation of the field trips. He's been such a important part of that in the past. So I hope we manage okay. So the presentation here is an overview of what we might see tomorrow. It was put together by Dave, but I've contributed a few extra things just in the past day or so. Made a few modifications. Dave's seen it and he's okay with it, so it's all okay. But most of it is Dave's presentation. So without further ado, we'll go through the butterflies. You'll see lots of butterflies here. I'll go through some faster than others, of course. We have our great science advisor in the audience, John Pelham, who he's looking behind, but he knows who he is. And I probably will call upon him for some of the species that I'm not so familiar with. I was hoping John Davis was here as well. He lives in Klickitat or down in the gorge somewhere. And he would have a lot of local knowledge about what we are likely to see tomorrow. So Dave has prepared all these species that I'm going to show you, and I'm sure we're not going to see them all, but they're all potential. So we will see swallowtails, and people who have been out there today have already seen swallowtails. I'm not sure if we'll see this one. We'll make this pretty informal, so if anyone's been down there, been around and seen any of these things, just let me know. But this is the old world swallowtail, which is very similar to the next species, which is the anise swallowtail. And one of the good ways of telling them apart is looking at the spots down there. Anise swallowtails, invariably, the pupil is free within the circle, whereas with the old world swallowtail, which is rarer, less frequently encountered, the spots generally touch the sides. So that's one good way of differentiating them. The other way is the body. The body of the old world swallowtail is yellow, basically with a couple of black lines. It looked good when you turned it off, yeah, but he can't do his video then. Shows off the pictures in their best. Okay, so we're more likely to see anise swallowtail than the old world swallowtail, but the gorge is a good place for old world swallowtails. Their larvae feed on tarragon. The anise swallowtail's larvae feeds on limation, and both those plants occur down the gorge. There's a lot of limation around, so anise swallowtails are more abundant everywhere. So we're more likely to see anise swallowtail. I mean, I think we're sort of guaranteed to see anise swallowtail. And the other thing is comparing the bodies again. The body of the anise swallowtail is mostly black with just, actually this picture's not very good. There should be yellow, not white. So it's a yellow stripe. And the caterpillars, you might actually, if we look around on the ground as well as in the air and look at limation, you may actually find larvae. I had one of my technicians today down in the gorge, actually, I don't think it was today, it was a couple of days ago, but they found larvae of anise swallowtails on limation. At this size, they're mature now. They're finishing their development before the limation completely dries up. They're in a race to get the development done. So it's quite possible we could find, if you're looking on limation, larvae of anise swallowtails. The other swallowtail we will see, I think, is Indra swallowtail. This is one of the best places to find Indra swallowtails. When we did the book and we wanted to rear Indra swallowtails, Dave and I both came to Klickitat Canyon to find female Indra swallowtails, and we weren't disappointed. So I've seen them already this year. They're having a good year in most of the places that I've visited. There's more of them around Yakima and in the Yakima Valley than normally we see, and the same in the gorge too. So I'm fairly confident we're going to see this species, which is a beautiful swallowtail. It's a bit smaller. The tails are very, very minute, as you can see there. And they will pose sometimes. This was taken earlier this year in Cowishi Canyon, actually. So, that's another indication of how common they are this year. They just land on people's noses. The other swallowtail we definitely see is the western tiger swallowtail. They're just beginning their flight now, but I assume they're flying down here. If John was here, I'd ask him, but I'm fairly confident we're going to see these. These are the largest swallowtails. Apart from the next one here, you saw one already? Good. And then we have the two-towered swallowtail, which is slightly larger, more yellow, less black. So you can see the difference there. These two pictures sort of demonstrate it pretty well. Around Yakima, they're all two-towered swallowtails, which is really good because I really like this species. It's the largest butterfly we have in the western US. Can be 4 inches, 4.5 inches across the wingspan there. So spectacular, and we're very likely to see them. The sun's going to be out, so we're probably going to see them. And the other swallowtail we probably will see is the pale tiger swallowtail, which is paler, almost white in some instances, a little bit of yellow sometimes, but much paler than the other ones we've just seen, and common. Some places it's the commonest swallowtail. I'm not sure about the gorge. And Jim?
Yeah, they're all over the place.
They're all over, yeah. They're usually, you know, the most abundant swallowtail in this sort of habitat. And if we're lucky, and we've had a lot of rain lately, and we go into wet areas, we can see them feeding or imbibing salts and moisture from sand or mud. And they can be quite spectacular when you see a whole bunch of them together like that. So that's the swallowtail. So we see a good number of species of swallowtails. Which ones are we missing, John? Is there any?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah,
we see all our wash species swallowtails. Yeah? So that's pretty cool to be able to see them all in one field trip. The whites, so Becker's white, this is a spring sage shrub steppe species that is down this far into the gorge. It's not as common here as it is in the Yakima Valley, but we're still fairly likely to see it. It's getting towards the end of its flight period, particularly in the Yakima Valley anyway. It might not be so towards the end of its period here, but it's a beautiful butterfly on the underside, as you can see there. When it's flying, it looks very much like any other white, so you need to see it settled before you can see the beautiful underside. Spring white, we probably are out of the flight period of this. This, as its name suggests, is very much a spring species, early spring. In recent years, I've found very few of these. I don't know if anyone else has experience, but they're much harder to find than they were just 5 years ago. So I don't know another instance of a population declining, perhaps a species declining. Hopefully we'll see one, but the chances for this are not too good, I don't think, in my estimation. Western white, probably a bit early, but John, do you think that we can still see western whites? Yeah. Okay. Around Yakima, it's usually a bit later before we start seeing them. But by late summer, they're very common. So yeah, we hopefully will see one of those. We're going to see a cabbage white, maybe. Yes, Jim? Even in pristine habitats, I mean, I'm not sure how pristine the habitat will be that we go to tomorrow, you still see cabbage whites. You know, this is the only pest butterfly species that occurs throughout the world, just about. It's cosmopolitan, and you know, a lot of countries, there's pest control programs for it, and so it's a very urban type butterfly, agricultural type butterfly. But you'll still find it in pristine habitats. It will surprise you on the top of a mountain somewhere. And so, you know, it has, you know, I've grown to love it over the years. It's, you know, it's the first butterfly you often see in the spring, and often the last butterfly you see in the autumn as well. So it's extremely adaptable, very resilient, and you can't fault its persistence. And if you grow cabbages, well, just grow more for the cabbage whites. Large marbles, they're having a good year. Beautiful underside again. Again, when they're flying, they look, you know, with whites, I have to, John probably can tell from their flight behaviour which species he's looking at, but I usually have to catch them and look at their undersides before determining what they are. It's very hard to tell what they are just when they're flying, because they all look white. You can't really see the underside when they're flying. Orange tip, very iconic butterfly, one of the first spring butterflies again with the orange tips, and again it occurs, different subspecies or different species, related species occur throughout the world, including England, where I first fell in love with butterflies. Orange tip was one of my favourites, and again it's an early spring species, and in higher elevations you'll see them, you know, flying in July, but by now they're probably up at emerging at a higher level than than where we are tomorrow. But we might be surprised. The weather this year has been very strange, hot, cold, wet, so it's still possible. Again, the underside is worth looking at.
I netted 2 of those today.
You netted 2 of them? Well, there you go. Please pipe up.
They were a little bit worn.
A little bit worn. They should be worn at this time. But, okay, so they're the whites. Moving on to the sulphurs. Clouded sulphur. Anyone seen Jim, you seen clouded sulphur yet?
I haven't seen it yet this year.
I've seen them in the Yakima Valley. They're flying now. And
They might be up here in Goldendale.
right. So it's. I would say we'd see clouded sulphur. Sulphurs are a difficult group for me. John, I know, is great on sulphurs, aren't you, John? But
What?
yeah, with the sometimes it's looking at the underside mostly. John will say the upside as well, of course, but it's both sides. But the spotting and the central spot there are key features, and these spots here, and the overall coloration. Let's look at some of these others. The orange sulphur. I haven't seen any of these flying yet. These are easier because they're quite orange
You didn't
inside.
see the day going up to the pass?
Sorry.
On the way up the pass, I saw probably 10 to 15.
Orange.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're beginning to emerge now. They don't overwinter here, right? No. We don't think
they
they're-
overwinter in and around like the Tri-Cities and Walla Walla. You get the early spring forms on occasion.
Okay.
But yeah, generally here you're getting stuff to the second brood.
So that's why we usually see the clouded sulphur first, because they do
Right.
overwinter here.
Right.
Whereas this one is less adept at overwintering here, but it should be emerging if it had, as John said, seen it already. So again, you can see they're very similar, and I get these two confused all the time, but except when the orange sulphur is really orange inside. So you saw them driving along, did you? So you could
It was
check.
pretty obvious.
It's pretty obvious. Okay.
David, there's a question.
Yeah.
Question?
And when we went to Quincy Lakes over the alfalfa fields, we saw about 100 of them.
What, recently?
That was the Frenchman included the field trip. Yeah, it was May 11th, I think.
Oh, really?
What lake?
Frenchman Cooley.
Yeah, the
Oh,
area.
yeah. See,
Alfalfa
now that would be a
fields.
place where there's actually a vernal survival.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Right on the river, so it's getting buffered.
Right. But alfalfa fields are a great place to see them, and especially late in the summer you'll see the field alive with clouded sulphurs. Western sulphur is common at Satyrs Pass, I know that. Down here, John?
No, it's probably a little too early for them.
Yeah. So they're more June, late June, late June. So I'll be very surprised if we see that. But as you can see, it's they're pretty similar. But there's something about these butterflies that sets them apart in their flight behaviour, and there's other things that I can't put my finger on at the moment. But when you see them, they stand out from the other two. The next one is more of a confusion for me, and it's more of a locality thing. I don't think we'll find these either. Do you think, John?
Well, if we spend time right down on the river, we get into some primary habitats. See, they really like native, local weeds, astragalus, and there's not much of that along the river.
No. So Blue Mountains and northern Washington, the places I've seen these, and I'd be surprised if we see one tomorrow. But again, you can see the similarity between all these 4 species, which is why we need John to help distinguish them. Can you do it while they're flying, John? You can identify them when they're flying?
Actually,
the western
pretty much.
sulphur,
I mean, if you see things, I'm 62 years old.
Yeah, I know.
I got 50-some years into this. Yeah, most of it I can pick
I can
out.
understand that. I've been here.
And Alexandra is UV reflected, and I'm sensitive to UV, so I can tell orange sulfurs in Alexandra from the other two.
Interesting. Okay.
It's
Poplars. Moving on to the smaller species, and if you're not familiar with coppers, they're all about half an inch across. They're diminutive, but a fascinating group. And the ruddy copper is one that prefers dry habitats. I know a population around Yakima and one at Mattawa in central Washington. I don't know of any down here, Jim.
Dallasport area.
Dallasport area.
Dallasport, yeah.
Okay.
It's a little early still, isn't it?
It's too early.
At Mattawa they're flying, but it's a lot warmer at Mattawa than, they're not flying at Yakima yet. So yeah, it's probably too early to see them. But they're a beautiful butterfly to see because they're, they live up to the copper name. They're really vivid, bright copper colour. And they're fairly big as well for coppers. So you can't mistake them. Once you see them flying, you'll never mistake them again. But then, in contrast, you have the blue copper, which is not copper at all, but it's blue. And this you'll mistake for a blue butterfly. Again, I think this might be too early for this. It's
Yeah, I would,
marginal.
yeah.
See, it's, this year, if we hadn't had the last 2 weeks of cool, cloudy conditions in eastern Washington and wet, a lot of these things might be out now, because the first part of May was really hot. And if that had continued, a lot of these things would for sure be out.
Well, they diapause as eggs, right? So they got to go
They've got
through
to
the whole
develop.
development. in
They've
the
got to,
spring.
they've got to develop. But generally we see them in mid-June. But I doubt that we're going to see them tomorrow. But they're a beautiful butterfly too. This one we will see. This is the purplish copper. It's our commonest copper. And if it'll occur in weedy situations, in pristine areas. It's very widely distributed. Most coppers feed on docks, Rubex species, so wherever docks are, you tend to find this species. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see this tomorrow. So that's the coppers. And the hair streaks, the next group of small butterflies. Coral hair streak, well, it's Dave's favourite, so that's probably why he put this slide in. I don't think we're going to see this tomorrow, are we, John? No. This is later, and also we find it around Yakima and up at Ellensburg and places like that. I've never seen it down here. So, Jim, have you seen coral
I
hair?
have never seen that one here. Not
So I think we can.
but you never see a bunch of them once in
No, generally. The exceptions you see hundreds at a time. That's a once in a lifetime.
Bayer's hair streak, again, I think this is a little early for this one. At Yakima, it's not until mid-June we'll see this fly. And I'm not sure about down here. Jim, again, Bayer's hair streak?
I haven't seen it this year though.
Have you seen it down here ever?
In the past, in high elevations in July.
Okay. California hair streak, again, I think it's a little bit early. Jim, have you seen California? So a lot of these, they all look very relatively similar. Hedgerow hair streak, I know, is common at Satyrs Pass in July. We're a little bit lower here, so June would be the time for this. But again, I think we're slightly too early for this one.
We've netted it this last 2 weeks.
You have? Oh, good.
A series of them, yeah.
Down.
Along that river.
Good. Okay, so we might see this one. Hedgerow hair streak. Then we have there's 3 green hair streaks, and this is now Jumatorum, which used to be Perplexa. This is the one that has larvae that feed on cowpie vetch, right?
Yeah, I love that cow pie with that.
Cowpie vetch. It looks like a cowpie. So this is
We'll
common.
see it and you'll agree.
You'll know
it
why it
looks
was
like a
called
cow
cowpie vetch. So this is common at Satyrs Pass, but I don't. Jim, we spoke to him earlier, and I don't think he'd seen it down here. Or these 3. I mean, if we were confused about the sulphurs, then these green hair streaks are just as confusing. Especially the little white dots are sort of the diagnostic features that sometimes drop off and not drop off. But sometimes they don't have them, and then other times, the butterfly's worn and you can't see them. So there's a lot of variability, and it's more to do with where they live in and their life history, what they're feeding, the larval host is. This one feeds on vetches, as I said. The other 2 feed on buckwheats. So western green hair streak and locality. So this is, I'll go to the next one too, which is Sheridan's hair streak, which is the first one you see in the spring, and it's usually down in lower areas. It's down where we're going tomorrow. Is this finished, Jim?
I've seen a couple of these around.
Yeah, I mean, when I was down there earlier this year and saw you, we didn't see any of these. So it doesn't seem to be having a very good year. I didn't see many around Yakima. But usually they're They're in canyons, low and around Yakima, early in the season, in early April, late March even sometimes. Whereas this one here, the western green hair streak, is a little bit later, more Mayish, about now. But you find it on the ridges. It's still a buckwheat feeder, but a different locality, sort of more on the ridges rather than in canyon bottoms. But as you can see, they look very similar. Although these pictures tend to sort of suggest they're quite different. But believe me, they're quite similar. So we may see this one. We possibly could see some worn ones of these, but I think it's fairly unlikely. I know John wants to see these, but I don't think we're going to see these unless we go to Satan's Pass, and even then it'll be too early. So they're the green hair streaks. Thicket hair streak, have you seen them, Jim?
I have in the past, haven't seen them yet this year.
Okay. I think I have heard people have seen them in the region, not this region, but in Washington somewhere. But I'm not sure that they're out yet. But they're quite distinctive and certainly a nice butterfly to see, but I'm not sure we're going to see them. Juniper hair streak occurs where junipers are, obviously it feeds on juniper. In the Columbia Basin, I always go to juniper dunes to find this species, and places in Oregon, and I don't know too many other places. Jim? No?
And if we're out in the East County out towards Roosevelt, we might. They're in the junipers.
So where the junipers occur, it's a possibility of finding these, but it's a possibility, but I wouldn't bank on it.
They would be further east. Yeah. If you go down on the Columbia River, follow it, and look up to the Orange Seven Hills, you'll see the junipers lining the ridge top.
Right.
And if you ever get there from the top side, then you actually find we've got about 20 records from up there.
Aren't you confusing those with windmills?
Huh?
Aren't you confusing junipers with windmills?
I have on occasion, but it really hurt when I tried to find eggs.
So, brown elfins are very common in the gorge and the tributaries earlier in the season. Are they still flying, Jim?
I saw one today.
You saw one today, okay. Did it look warm?
No.
They always
not
look
that
warm
bad.
anyway, I guess. They're sort of fairly nondescript. So they're having a good year, so we should see them down there too. They're very common, brown elfin. And even commoner, western pine elfin, I think. Certainly when I visited this area a couple of months ago, 6 weeks ago, they were extremely abundant. More abundant than I've ever seen them. Jim, was that?
I think this is the most I've ever seen.
Yeah, they're having an excellent year. So there should still be some around, even though it's late in the okay. So you'll see these, and if you watch them carefully, you can see them perching on pines, even laying eggs, and actually feeding on pine catkins. I saw for the first time this year. So they've got a very close relationship with pine, obviously, because their larvae feed on pine. Beautifully cryptic larvae that blends in with the pine needles. So yeah, we're going to see them. The grey hair streak, we'll probably see them. These butterflies can turn up anywhere throughout the US, right? Throughout the US, John? So it's almost it's cosmopolitan in the US, and one of the reasons why is it feeds on just about everything as a caterpillar. There's the list of recorded host plants is extremely long. They feed on all sorts of strange plants, just about anything. So they're very adaptable, and they'll turn up anywhere, a bit like the cabbage white, really, turning up in all sorts of strange places. So if we don't see one of those, I'll be very surprised. And they're beautiful in their own way, even though they're common. They're very, very beautifully marked on the underside. So they're hair streaks. They're moving on to another group of small butterflies, the blues. The western tail blues, and again, identification of these can be a problem for inexperienced people, and even for experienced people sometimes. It's usually based on looking at the undersides, but the really experienced people like John will look at the upper sides too, because the shades of blue will differ. This is the western tail blue, and this is the only one that has, that's right, isn't it, John? The only one that has a tail? Apart from the eastern tail blue, a sister species that occurs more in the eastern part of the state eastern US, and I don't think we're going to see eastern tail blue here. I don't think Dave put that picture in. But western tail blue, Jim?
I haven't seen them yet this year, but
They're usually fairly early, so they should be around.
Yeah, they just don't seem to be real common.
I've seen quite a bit this year. They seem to be having a good year in Yakima Valley. Celestrina Echo Blue. It's getting a little bit late for echoes, but have you seen echoes still flying, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay, so we could see some of those. That almost looks like migrations, doesn't it?
Well, no, that looks like.
That's what I put that slide in. This is one of my additions. John and I have been talking about these two species and a third species called Lucia Blue. They're all Celestrina species. Well, this one is Echo, and this is Echo nigrescens. It's not a full species yet. It's a subspecies, but as you can see, it's quite different, and it has a different habitat, different timing. There's a lot of differences between it and the first species, so it could well be a different species. Would we see them here, John? Is there possibility? Status past, we both know there's a lot up there. But
Yeah, no, I would expect to see them up.
It's quite possible. So I put this in because we may see echo variants that look like this that could be nigrescent. So this is something that is active research, really, in looking at the differences between these species or subspecies. So John and I would be interested in seeing this, if you see any of these. Moving on to Euphalotes, and this is another group that Dave specialised in, Dave Nunnallee, I haven't taken the time to really get to know these species, so they are a confusion, but I know that this is the commonest species. They all look very similar. I think Dave's got two here, so you can see how similar they are. This so-called Cascadia blue, it doesn't really have, it hasn't been described as a species yet. This is in our book, and it definitely appears to be a species, but no one's described it. And it's been seen at Satyrs Pass, but it hasn't been seen in this part of Klickitat County. So Dave actually put crosses on the butterflies here to make you aware that we need to look for this here, because it will be a new record, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be.
We're going to find it tomorrow.
We're going to find it. John's going to find it tomorrow. Well, somebody's going to find it, and John's going to identify it. But so the Columbia blue is different. You can see the dots there are blockier, and really it's one of these things you have to see a lot of them and be experienced like John is, and even with limited experience like I have over 14 years here, I can tell the differences between these species. There are other Euphalotes species as well, and I'm not sure if we're going to see those. Dave didn't put any others down, so he's not thinking we're going to. Arrowhead blue, this is a very attractive species on the underside. I mean, all these blues are blue on the upper surface, various different shades of blue. It's the undersurfaces that differ, and this obviously differs very significantly. You can see the arrowheads there on the underside. And this year, I've encountered it quite often in odd places, in very dry places. Blue Mountains is a good place for it, but not so dry. But I found it at Mattawa, near the Columbia River, and so John realised I hadn't seen it there before.
Well, it shows up in a lot of places in the Palouse that are real dry too. So
well, it's very, very adaptable. Then I mean, it'll be in cooler, wetter areas and dry. So, Jim, have you seen arrowhead blues?
I haven't seen them here, but
Okay. Anything's possible.
I would think at higher elevations. they might do
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I found them at very low elevations as well. So, but I find them also at very high elevations. So they are very adaptable. Maybe they used to be a lot more common than what they are now, because they're not abundant species. It's something special to find one of these.
found them up at Mount Adams quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll watch out for arrowhead blues. Silvery blues, in contrast, are very common. One of the earliest blues, but they're still flying, Jim?
If so, they're right at the very tail.
Right at the very tail. So if you see a silvery blue, these dots will be barely distinct probably. If we find a grey blue with no markings at all, it'll probably be a silvery blue. But they're very common and widespread, and a lot of habitats, and they no doubt occur where we're going tomorrow. But they may be at the end of their season. Melissa blue is is that a butterfly turns up in non-pristine conditions. It'll be in waste lots and, yes, John?
That's what you just said is actually true most of the places, but there's a cowpie vetch population that's strictly associated with that plant. That sage pass, and it's all the way at the same forested habitats. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that tomorrow too.
Okay.
And it's not the agricultural thing that you're talking about. We could see both of them.
So you're saying that there's another entity?
It's a cohort, you know, it's something that's adapted to that
Right.
plant. It's not a different species or even
Right.
subspecies. It's
Okay.
just a local thing.
I'm just trying to recall. I don't think I've ever seen it in anywhere but a disturbed area. You know, so I've only seen this Melissa blue. So I'll just pass on to this one or that one, because there's similarity here between the scintillate here, or the red markings here with this lupine blue, and then go back to Melissa. The main distinguishing feature, you've got the red markings on the top. So we're going to see, very likely to see Melissa blue and the lupine blue, but the difference will be the fact that Melissa has the orange or red on the forewing, whereas lupine blue only has it on the hind wing. They both have these so-called scintillae, which is sort of iridescent type blue markings, and otherwise they're very similar. It's just that, and they often occur in similar habitats. Greenish blue, it's probably a bit early for these. Seen any greenish blue? But later on in the summer they're very common, and again their markings get wiped out very easily when they get worn, so often they're hard to determine. The commonest blue is Wadevoir blues. For a long time I called this Bois Duval's blue, but that's because of my lack of French. Wadevoir blue, or common blue, which I used to use a lot, is the most common blue, and we'll be seeing that, won't we, Jim? Yes. It occurs just about everywhere. It's having a very good year this year in particular. In habitats where you'll see large numbers, this year there were just thousands, not hundreds, thousands. It was just, you know, the very quick spring we had just brought them all out at once, and they had a tremendous flight in some locations. But you'll find them at low elevations, mid elevations, high elevations, so you can go to the mountains at 7,000 feet in the summer and still find these blues flying that just emerged fairly recently. And so, you know, different populations have different phenology or flight period in different places. But we should still be seeing them where we're going tomorrow. And the markings there are fairly characteristic, sort of blurred white spots. Sometimes when they're worn they can be confused with silvery blues, but mostly they're recognisable. And often they like puddling or mudding or whatever you want to call it, feeding on damp soil, and since it's wet, it has rain, we could see them in their if they're abundant doing this behaviour. And there's the lupine blue, which is very misnamed because it actually larvae feeds on buckwheat, doesn't feed on lupin at all. So we need to change that, John. Can't really change it because it's got a scientific name that says lupini, so it would be impossible to change that, wouldn't it, John?
Jim Scott tried. He called it Plebeius A. lupina.
So we'll probably see this. This is having this is another species that, along with the next species, that are very hard to distinguish, and we need John to look at these. And it is a more of a feeling thing, and we're confused by them too, aren't we, John? I mean,
yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, there could be more species out there than we realise, because their occurrence and their phenology differs in different places, and it's a mess. It's a total confusion. They have generations in the spring, in the autumn, but in some places just one or the other, and different host plants too. And Bob Pyle's interested in this as well as Dave Nunnallee. Dave Nunnallee has actually started dissecting the genitalia of these species. So John and I and Bob are sending Dave these butterflies for him to dissect, and he's become quite expert at taking out the genitalia and photographing them, and you can actually distinguish these two species definitely by looking at their genitalia. And if there are other species, we'll be able to determine that as well. So these two represent a conundrum. I don't know if you want to add any more to that, John?
Well, the one thing about Ackmon that you can always kind of rely on, it's kind of a weedy butterfly. It's not a butterfly that you would go into pristine habitats to look for. The best indication that it occurs is like an old rusty car hulk or a couch or a bed mattress lying by the side of the road. Those are the kinds of places where it occurs. It specializes in plants that utilize those kinds of places. You know, the weeding lotus, you know, vetches, and you know, wasted area legumes. And so they do really well in those kinds of places. They also are expansive, and they're multiple brooded, and they breed really quickly. So they could be in one part of the state and spread to another part really quickly over the course of a season.
So we'll watch out for those. And I know Ackmons are fairly common in the gorge. So we could well see both tomorrow. So that'll be like the Echo Blue nigrescens thing. This will be another particular interest that some of us will have. So moving on to what I call fritillaries, but other people call fritillaries for some reason. But my wife says I should stick my ground and continue with fritillaries. But actually they were arguing about that on Lepidoptera listservs just recently. So fritillary, yeah. So Great Spangled fritillary, I think we're a bit early for that. Do you see them in the gorge, Jim?
Only at high elevations.
High elevations again, yeah. They're a beautiful butterfly, the female in particular, the underside. They're one of the largest fritillaries, but I doubt very much we're going to see one of them tomorrow. The only fritillary that's flying at the moment is this one, Coronis fritillary. And this one's feeding on damp soil here. And this has special interest to me at the moment because I'm actually doing some active research on this butterfly. We've started a citizen science tagging project with Cowishi Canyon Conservancy, which just commenced. Actually, I was in the field today training Cowishi Canyon Conservancy docents who are interested, members of the public that are interested in conservation and natural history, training them to catch Coronis fritillaries and tag them. And it went remarkably well. The docents learned how, even though I supplied the smallest net I could find with the shortest handle accidentally, they still caught the butterflies and were able to tag them. So the reason we're doing this is because of a paper that John Pelham and I wrote just a couple of years ago, which collated all the observational data that we had on this butterfly over the last 40 years, because John's been around for quite a while. And so his data went back a long time. My data didn't go back very far at all. But we put it all together, and it seemed to suggest that we know that they breed in the shrub steppe, and then they disappear. And with the observational data, it suggested that they move to higher elevations. And they're certainly, you know, go to 7,000 feet in the summer in the Cascades, you'll find Coronis fritillaries feeding on flowers up there at that time. And then in late summer, they come back. And so they turn up, usually on September the 1st every year in Yakima, in my backyard, a Coronis fritillary will appear. For the last 5 years, it's been September the 1st every time. And they're worn at that time, but the females then are laying eggs on the ground because the larvae feed on sage steppe, or shrubs, sorry, sage violet. And that's the only place it grows, in the shrub steppe. So we got this hypothesis that they move up and down migration, a bit like the monarch on a small scale, you know, going up and down, not flying to Mexico and back. So I figured we could try and prove that by tagging them, just like people have tagged monarchs for the last, you know, numerous decades and worked out the migration patterns of monarch butterflies. So that's the aim for this. And it's a multi-year program. This is just the first year. There'll be teething problems, but we've already tagged 100. And see, yeah, because Snow Mountain Ranch is, you know, the Cowishi Canyon Conservancy property is a true hotspot for Coronis fritillaries. The violets are just like carpets of violets, and when they emerge, and this year is a good year for them, there's literally hundreds around. And so, you know, and they're nectaring on flowers at the moment, or on the ground, feeding on the wet soil. It's quite easy to catch a large number. And so that's the idea of having a workforce of interested people with nets going out there every day, catching butterflies and tagging them. We feasibly could tag many hundreds, especially over multiple years, and surely someone's going to find them in the mountains. And so I'd like all of you to take this on board as well. If you're in the mountains in the summer and you see fritillaries, watch out for tags. They could either be on the upper surface or on the lower surface, because I realised after a while that the upper surface is harder for people to do than people like me who've done it before. And I wanted them on the upper surface because when they're sitting on flowers in the mountains, they'll be easier to see. And in this day and age, when people have got cell phones and cameras, it's a lot easier to get the data back. You know, people take pictures and we can zoom into it on Photoshop and get the number.
Need a butterfly or a picture, or can somebody just say that they saw a
Well,
certain number?
Well, I prefer a picture or the actual specimen. But I mean, you know, if people see them and you just see a tagged butterfly, we'd like it reported, because then we can go out and have a closer look perhaps. But obviously, each one's individually numbered, so we'll need that data so to know where it came from, etc. We know where it came from, but when it was tagged. And so the idea is to hopefully find them in the mountains in the summer. We've got hiking groups involved, a lot of community organisations that spend a lot of time in the mountains in the summer. We figure that, we don't know where they're going exactly. I know that they occur at 7,000 feet in the places I go in the Cascades, but that's directly west of Yakima. They could go north or further south. I mean, John and I were talking about this before. We don't know which direction they're going to go. It could be anywhere in the Cascades. It could be at Mount Rainier. So we just need to get the publicity out.
Well, they certainly are at Mount Rainier, so
Yeah,
Mount
right.
Rainier came from somewhere.
Right, they came from somewhere. So this is, we could find something unexpected as to where they're actually going. So that's the underside view. So watch out for them in the summer. So we will see them here tomorrow because, well, I think we will. Have you seen any, Jim? No. But certainly at Satyrs Pass, they're up there, or they
They're
will
at
be.
Schnebly Coulee.
Schnebly Coulee, right.
They were there 3 days ago.
Okay. So they could be, but we'll just have to see. Zarine Fritillary, I don't think so again, because that's a little bit later than Coronis usually. So we may not see any greater fritillaries at all tomorrow. It'd be good if we do, but...
Are you going to do a study to see if the ones with the tags are rejected by their mates?
That'll be the next step, yeah. No, well, Coronis Fritillary mating behaviour is quite aggressive. I don't think there'll be... Anyway, Calypt Fritillary, very similar to Coronis and occurs in similar habitats. Again, it's probably a bit too early for that here.
No, they're right with Coronis, actually. It saves fast.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Coronis, then we'll see Calypt.
All right. Again, I haven't got an underside picture here, but we'll look. It's the underside that you're looking at to differentiate between Coronis and Calippi. And John or I can tell you about that. Hi, Datsby. Are we going to see that tomorrow? No, that's a little bit later. They're easier to identify because their disc colour is a muddy chocolate colour. Very easy to recognise from the previous species I've shown, but we're probably not going to see them. Yeah. Later on in the summer, they're very common. Are they common down here, Jim?
Yeah, at higher elevation.
Higher elevation. Western Meadow Fritillary, I've seen some of these flying already this year in some locations, but it's still early. They're a lesser fritillary, they fly slower, but I'm not sure if we'll see these.
You go to Mount Adams.
We go to Mount Adams probably a little bit later. Checker spots, northern checker spot. Dave put this in. Do you see northern checker spots down here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if they're northern.
Well,
To me, all checker spots are
northern or sagebrush checker spot. We're on the edge of sagebrush checker spot country, and so this may be a zone where both of them occur.
We actually have records from just outside of Goldendale, both of them.
Of both of them, so there you go. So again, they're quite difficult to separate. There's a slight difference in their timing of flight, right?
Right.
So if we see one, it will be one or the other. Probably a castus, right? The sagebrush.
Yeah.
I think the other one's a bit later. You can see the female here is very different from the male, which is more the normal checker spot, a bit like that one there. But in certain, later on, they can be very common. The sagebrush checker spot is common right now in the Columbia Basin. It's peak season for that. And that's the underside of the sagebrush checker spot, which is very, very nice. Field crescent, a common butterfly, maybe a bit early for field crescent.
We've been catching crescents,
You
but I
have
think we've been catching Moletta.
Myletta, which is the next slide, I think, no. I don't think we're going to get pale crescent. I don't know why Dave put this in, but that's quite a rare species. It's larger than field crescent or the Myletta crescent, which is the most common crescent and probably the one that we will see tomorrow. And some of these are very, very small, and almost not much bigger than a large blue. And so it's a very small orange butterfly is likely to be this. And I think we're more likely to see that than this one tomorrow. Snowberry checker spot is one of the commoner checker spots, but again, a bit early.
Checker spots, checker spots.
You've seen some though, right?
I think
Yeah, I've seen some checker spots.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you see a checker spot, it's almost certainly that.
Okay, right. So we might see them. They're pretty common. And they're quite distinctive.
I'm not John spots.
Easiest checker spot, I don't think we'll see easiest checker spot here. Possibility?
That would be at Simcoe View.
Simcoe View, yeah, for sure. But even then, it's probably a bit early.
No, that'd be right on. It would
Really?
be, you either get that or Nevada, either of the two. So. Sounds like a Sunday trip to me.
Okay, moving on to the true brushfoots, the larger nymphalid butterflies. The comma, satyr, comma, satyr, comma, common, comma, whatever you want to call it. There's probably one that we will see. It's the commonest comma, Polygonia species. Very distinctive butterflies, you're hopefully familiar with them. Again, the underside is their identification. You need to see the underside rather than the upper side. Green comma there. Do you see green commas down here?
Yeah, they're, love my yard.
Okay, so we like to see green commas, and the underside at this time of year, the green mottling colour you can barely see there is probably barely seeable anyway because it's warm, but certainly when they emerge in late summer, it's very distinctive, the green coloration on the underside. So it sounds like we'll see them. Hoary comma, they occur here too? No?
Yeah, if you're high enough elevation,
Okay, but this,
and west,
right.
in the west
This-
end of the county.
Again, at Satyrs Pass, you'd see a lot of these. They're very abundant. And in a lot of places, they're the most abundant comma. And quite distinctive with the hoary characteristic of the underwings there. But we may or may not see them. California tortoiseshell seems to have dropped off the radar for the last couple of years because it's a butterfly that depends upon migrations from the south, like the monarch butterfly and a few other things. But whereas monarchs are fairly regular, we may not see many of them, but they make the journey every year. These butterflies don't always make the journey. Populations, yes, John?
Yeah, they're probably not really migratory from the south. They undergo boom and bust years right here in the States.
So you think they're here all the time and
Yeah.
they're just at very low densities? Because
Right.
I haven't seen one for the last couple of seasons.
Well, my experience over the time, we'd have maybe 1 or 2 seasons of abundance and then 4 years of absence and like that on a regular basis. And then it was like up until they dropped up the map, what, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
We'd had 7 years in a row
Was it
of
7?
abundance. So,
I know, yeah,
yeah.
they were
So
very abundant. I mean, that
maybe
last,
it'll drop off the map a little
the
longer.
last year I saw them, they were extremely abundant, and Blue Mountain was just clouds of it, it's just
Right,
huge.
right.
And then the next year, nothing.
Right,
So we must be due pretty soon, next year, or this year perhaps,
I would think.
for a resurgence of California tortoiseshell.
We've got a couple of very worn ones
This year?
this year.
Really?
They look
So
like they overwintered even.
Right, well, they do, yeah, they
well, that-
so they could be the year this
This
year.
could be the year. So the larval host plant is Ceanothus, and they probably will be larvae on Ceanothus fairly soon, if not already. So,
Conceivably, yeah.
About
So
5
maybe we
years
should
ago,
be
I had
looking-
one of these in my front yard on February 2nd.
Right, they diapause in the Columbia Basin, that's where they
Interesting.
get through the winter, right in the middle of the Columbia Basin, you know? Where there's not a food plant once for them.
no. Okay. So expect to see tortoiseshells at some time in the future. But this one, in contrast, is extremely common this year. Morning cloaks. Everybody's, if you've been out looking, you would have seen morning cloaks. They're almost like, I mean, this is interesting because it's almost the opposite of the California tortoiseshell. Do their cycles sort of opposite each other? You know, morning cloak and California tortoiseshell, because it almost seems like my limited experience that they...
Well, my feeling is that the morning globe's never as abundant as the California tortoiseshell is, right?
No, not
First of
to
all.
that sort of...
And generally, it kind of muddles along, at a fairly low level. But this year's outstanding. We've got
Yeah.
morning globe reports from all over the continent. They're more abundant in Texas. They've got like 4 new county records in
Oh,
Texas.
really?
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's like pretty amazing phenomenon. I just keep telling everybody, let's watch for the larvae. Get the clutches,
Yeah.
watch those.
I've been doing the same thing.
Yeah,
It's good.
and then, see, the really interesting thing about morning cloaks is that they'll emerge from this first brood in like end of June, July, and then they go into a diapause, and they hide under the boughs of the maples or the willows. So I've been encouraging people to go and find those things, because that'll be a real contribution to understanding of how these things get by. I've personally observed this on like four documented occasions, and I've seen it, didn't think anything of it before, but then I can't,
In groups or singly?
Oh, no, in groups and
In groups?
lined up, just
Oh, really?
stacked against one another. And one time, just outside of Ellensburg, as you're going into Canyon Road, I got up underneath the, I was, doing the Sylvan Hair Streak thing, and instead of walking the whole hedgerow, I walked through the willow thicket to get to the other side, because there was milkweeds on both sides, but not around the end, right? And I got in the middle, and I'm looking up, and I'm seeing these branches just lined with morning glories.
Really?
Seriously, lined with them. And then you touch them, and they just kind of like play dead, right? And then in the literature, there was all these records of morning cloaks playing dead. I'm thinking that was this recording of the same phenomenon with a lack of understanding of what actually was entailed.
Yeah.
Last year in Denver, Andy Warren had about 14 or 15 pupae that he was, keeping for emergence, and we'd come back each day and go in and look at these things. And in every case, they were lined up in one corner of that box, shingled against each other, just smack dab. And as you pulled them out, they didn't even flutter; they just fell into your hand. So this seems like a predisposed behavior,
Yeah, estivation.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it just shows you, even with common butterflies like the morning cloak, known throughout the world, we still don't know everything about its behavior and its biology and life history. So, there's still a lot to learn, even with common butterflies. Another nose picture. I've been specialising in nose pictures lately. And so you see the underside of the morning cloak. It's well adapted to being dormant in the winter, hiding in a dark spot, or even in the summer, as John said, because at the underside is very, very, it blends in. So Milbert's tortoiseshell, we could see some worn examples of these, or perhaps some new ones. The new generation is beginning to emerge around Yakima. Fresh Milbert's tortoiseshells. The larvae feed on stinging nettles. It's a common butterfly, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of these. Painted lady, again, it's another migrant species that sometimes we see hundreds of. In other years we see very few. So far there haven't been many reports, if any, of them moving through California, so it doesn't seem like this is going to be a big year for painted ladies either. We see 1 or 2 probably, but not a whole bunch. American lady, I'm not not why Dave put this in, because this is even less likely to see. But the Columbia Gorge is one of the few places where not often, but when they get this far north, then they'll be seen in the Columbia Gorge. Have you seen one, Jim, personally?
Yeah, well, way back when, who does the butterfly atlas?
Oh, Hinchliff.
Hinchliff. John, I gave him 3 Klickitat County
Okay.
specimens.
Right.
I would say on the basis of the concentration of records in Oregon, the gorge would be a good place for it.
Yeah.
Because they're at the other end of the gorge, they buy piles place a lot.
Right.
It's fairly common in the Tri-Cities.
Yeah.
Fairly common.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So this is the West Coast lady. This is one that I see more often. And in the last few years, it's seen more West Coast ladies than painted ladies. So, if we're going to see painted ladies, we'll probably see West Coast ladies. This is Vanessa Annabella, and the next slide is a bit of an indulgence, because this is Annabella Vanessa. I can promise you we'll see this lady tomorrow. She'll be there, and you'll probably hear her as well. This picture actually won a photo competition run by NPR just recently. So Annabella Vanessa's a famous little butterfly. Red Admiral, what's the bottom there? We probably will see red admiral. I don't know if John's seen this, but there's been migrant red admirals flying through Washington. In fact, what? I've seen them.
My whole thing with the red admirals is I come from a place where they overwinter.
Okay.
In Seattle, it's Banana Belt west.
Right. Yeah. They can overwinter.
Yeah. So over here they'd be moving in.
Well, in Yakima, we've seen worn, obviously, old specimens.
Right.
And today, I had a report at work that the red admiral caterpillars were attacking hops and causing damage, and the grower wanted to spray them. He said they were painted ladies, and they sent me a picture of the caterpillars, and so obviously a congregation of red admirals had come through the Willamette Valley. That's where the hops are, and so they seem to be moving up. And so this is the first record I've had of red admirals actually causing economic damage.
Whoa.
In fact, the same grower said he had it happen in '92, and he sprayed twice for them. So this is not something we want to...
Right, I'd keep it quiet.
Yeah. More red animals. But I'd be surprised if we don't see a red admiral. Lord Prince Admiral, I don't know if they're out yet.
Really? Already?
Yeah, I saw one.
Good. So hopefully we'll see them. They're a beautiful butterfly to see flying around. And there's one just emerged from the pupa there. And again, they have strange dietary behaviour. They're feeding on animal food, scat. And so you'll often see them congregating around animal droppings. So that's something to watch for.
Congregating around an animal dropping?
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Imbibing.
You mean they partake in
They'll congregate around a dead animal too. So it's not just the dropping.
That's pretty disgusting.
And then we come to the famous monarch, and maybe we will see a monarch. Didn't you, Caitlin, see one? Didn't you think you saw one? Not so.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a wedding release down here in the forest.
We could talk for hours about this, but we won't. They are. If they're not here already, they're very close to being here. It's usually the first week in June in a good year, which I think this will be, that we see them in Yakima. And they're certainly in Northern California. We were in Northern California last week, and there's plenty down there. And in fact, it's another active research project I'm working on at the moment, tagging monarchs, using these guys here that live in the penitentiary. And they're quite friendly guys, actually, once you get to know them. But it is an incarcerated citizen science project, and I felt quite worried going there for the first time. But once I met them and saw how interested they were in this and how enthusiastic and dedicated to rearing monarchs, my attitude changed completely. Well, I became more comfortable with them. And so we did this last year, and we tagged about 2,500, and we had recaptures back from California. Are you up to date with this, John? Or,
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
I don't object to it anymore.
No, good. Okay. It's slightly controversial, but I'm modifying my...
Well, you're not Paul Cherubini.
No, I'm not Paul
Cross a lot better.
So anyway, we're doing it again this year, and it's a plea again to watch out for tag monarchs. Most of the tags will be on the underside like that. So yeah, this is because we know very little about their movement in the Pacific Northwest compared to the eastern US, because the population of monarchs and people are so small, and if we depended upon tagging every monarch we see every year, and if we had an army of people to do it, it'd still take decades to get any results. You have to tag, hundreds to get, recaptures or recoveries. It's like 1% that you get recovered. So the only way to overcome that is to mass rear them, in my view. And so that's what we're doing, to get some idea, mainly to answer the possibility that some actually go to Mexico to overwinter rather than California, as Bob Pyle suggested. He hopefully is going to tell us more about this tomorrow in his talk, where he saw some flying towards Mexican direction, or different direction along the Snake River than would be expected if they were going to California. And in fact, from our recoveries last year, we had one from Utah. And if you look at it on the map, it's like going in two different directions. So there's a possibility there. But it's going to take a number of years and a lot of tagging to actually prove that. To get a monarch tagged in the Pacific Northwest, end up in Mexico. But that's the That's the goal, perhaps. So that was just a quick plug for that project. Oh, and as I said, in California last year, and one of the reasons why we don't have monarchs here is because the Californians apparently love spraying milkweed. And you know, I live in central Washington where we have milkweed all along the roadside. Nobody bothers about it. No one sprays it. It's just there, and nobody worries about it. But in California, they just spray it. They don't spray the other weeds. Oh, there you go. They don't spray the other weeds. They just spray the milkweed, and that's, you know, this is on the edge of the Trinity National Forest. So once you get in the forest, there's no spraying. But all on the outside, California Highway Department of Transportation, I presume, does it.
They don't claim it.
They don't claim it?
Oh, no, we're not interested in weed
Well, it's
control.
not the farmers.
We do it all or we do nothing.
Well, we need to get to the bottom of this. And Xerxes Society, who are, you know, interpret conservation, should get onto this politically, I think. Because, you know, the main reason we don't have monarchs in the numbers we used to have is because the population in California is far less than it was. I could show, maybe Bob will tomorrow show you a graph of the population decline in the monarch overwintering colonies, both in Mexico and California. It's a precipitous decline. So there's no doubt that the overall population throughout the US has declined. So there's no wonder that we don't see many every year. Okay, finally, well, getting towards the end, the browns or satyrids, we're obviously going to see ringlets. They're everywhere. Probably the most ubiquitous butterfly. Common wood nymph, I think, is very probably a bit early for seeing that.
A month?
Hmm?
A month?
A month. Yeah.
Yeah, July is when they
Yeah.
use it.
So we're probably not going to see that even in this slightly advanced year. And the same goes for the Great Basin wood nymph too. Very attractive butterflies, and butterflies that also have strange estivation behaviour in the summer. When it gets too hot, they'll hang out underneath trees like John was describing. Not in, well, actually in groups, yeah, 2, 3,
Right,
and 4s,
right.
in small
Mostly
groups.
like in smaller, like sage or
Yeah,
artemisia.
yeah, that's right. So, you know, they don't like extreme heat as well. They hang on to their eggs for a few extra weeks but when it cools down a little bit. And similarly, the dark wood nymph, I haven't seen that one. That seems more adapted to the shrub steppe. And have you seen that, Jim?
Not this year.
It's
but
still a little-
It's still a bit early,
Yeah.
even in Yakima it's still early. But it's another few weeks it'll be out. So we probably won't see any satyrids apart from the ringlet. Skippers, spread-winged skippers, silver-spotted skippers, they should be down here, right?
Yes,
Okay, this is a very largest skipper in Washington, very spectacular when it's flying and when it's doing its business. You won't forget it once you've seen it. Cloudy wings, these are common up at Satyrs Pass. I'm not sure about down here. Cloudy wings, they're another confusing group, right?
there's something, one of them is flying down here.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, again, John can help us out with the dusky wings or cloudy wings.
Well, that's another one of those cowpie vetch associates. That cowpie vetch is a
Right.
guild plant. There's
Yeah,
about
yeah, this one. So
6
that's
butterflies.
why you see it at Satyrs Pass with
Yeah.
the cowpie vetches. Dreamy dusky wing. Do you see that down here? Well, I don't know if you see that down here. It should be flying now if it is. You're definitely going to see this dusky wing. All the dusky wings we'd like you to see are going to be the Purpureous dusky wing or oak dusky wing. Its larvae feed on oak, and Gary oak is quite common down here. The flight begins about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but they're still flying, and we will see these. And they're probably a bit warm, very warm, right, Jim?
Well, Heidi had a beautiful one that I looked at.
There,
Really?
I think there's,
It was real fresh.
it's a real long brood, I think.
Extended brood. I mean, in
Yeah.
captivity,
I'm
they'll
pretty
produce a
sure.
second brood. We often wondered why they didn't do it in the wild.
I don't know if they're far enough apart to be a second brood. but-
I don't know, it looks to me on all the wives we plot, just one big long brood.
One big long
Yeah.
brood. Okay, we'll see them. Perseus dusky wing, which is fairly similar, but much smaller than the Perseus. I don't know if we'll see this, John.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll see this.
Another one of the cowpie vetch.
Okay. Two-banded checkered skipper. I think I've seen this very often in the Columbia Gorge area. Very small, but very distinctive. We should see them. And then the common checkered skipper is slightly larger. We should see these two. Again, weedy sort of specialist. Common sooty wing as well. That's another weedy type butterfly. Often find in weedy areas. It feeds on pigweed and other weeds similar. families. Recently, I haven't seen so many of them, but hopefully we'll see some of these. Very small. Grass skippers, juba skippers, they're very common. Most places, including down here, this time of year, they're getting a bit towards the end of their flight period. They may hold some secrets in their biology and life history too. They tend to move upwards with the season, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Western branded skipper are probably a bit early for that. They sort of replace juba skippers once juba starts dying off. Very similar markings as you can see. And dun skipper, I see a lot of them at Satyrs Pass, not down in the gorge.
It's kind of late, later insect, I wouldn't expect them to.
Okay. And finally, the common roadside skipper, which is a very small black skipper that can turn up just about anywhere.
Yeah, that's about right time of year.
About right time of year. Very hard to see because they're so small and they fly so fast. They're quite hard to follow, but we may see them. So that's it. That's all the potential species where we could see. We'd probably see half of these.
Yes, you missed one. I saw a great northern today.
The what?
Great northern.
Heliopedes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one Dave didn't put in. Didn't expect
Yeah,
to
no,
see
he missed that one.
Yeah.
Huh?
That's a later season.
They got early spring brood. You
Yeah,
see
that's
them a lot
spring
of the way.
brood, yeah.
They got 3 broods and one's not, like September.
Cool.
Okay, I got a question.
Yes, John.
Did those guys give themselves that name, or did you give them that name?
Which name? Incarcerated.
Incarcerated citizens.
What do you think, John? I gave them that name.
I gotta like it, man. That's like PC with the twist.